All right, welcome everybody to the ChooseFI Summer Series. We're excited tonight. We are joined by the very talented, amazing Allison, and then some guy known as Brad. I'm Stephen Hemptig. I am with the ChooseFI Foundation. I'm active duty Air Force out of Philadelphia and work with ChooseFI. I'm really excited tonight to dive into travel rewards. I know that's something that we're all getting back to in the world is opening up, and there's lots of people thinking about travel. I keep hearing about crazy stories with people driving around in Hawaii and U-Haul trucks, and so we're here tonight to try and avoid that kind of a fate in Hawaii. But Allison, do you want to introduce yourself for us real quick?
Yeah. So I'm Allison Tackett. I first started getting into points and miles when I was on active duty Army, actually. My first card was a BOA cashback card. Right. So I would save all that cash back every year to take my Christmas vacation home for my leave. And I was kind of like, well, this kind of stinks. I can't take more than one vacation, even though I have tons of leave to take. And instead, I finally just said, oh, I wonder what else is out there. And I just Googled credit cards out there. And I stumbled upon the Chase Sapphire Preferred and signed up for it and was like, I can take a lot of vacations with these. So I've just been kind of doing that and learning all of that while hoarding points over the first year while I was still trying to figure it out. And for my first redemption, I actually went to Australia for a week. Yeah. And then I've just kind of learned all the different ways to make vacations happen for the least amount of points now.
Nice. Wow. Are you doing incredible. Your own thing?
Yes. So I run a small blog called awardtravelvacations.com, and I focus on the booking aspect of it. So, for instance, a lot of people are like, hey, I want to go home and visit my parents for Thanksgiving, and I got to get from, say, Boston to Seattle. What are the best options that you can do? So I'll focus on the different airline alliances and show different options that you can to book with that. And sometimes I throw in like Southwest or a non-alliance, depending on the route. And then I'll look at different brands of hotels and how to make that work. But if you're going for vacation to see your family, you don't really need a hotel for that. But yeah.
That's true. Yeah. And just being a part of this world, you basically want to be friends with somebody like Allison, because anybody who runs their own award booking service, that means they are a true expert at this entire concept. And I mean, so many people, this is daunting for a lot of people, right? Allison, I know when I got into this, it probably similar to you, like I essentially like, is this real? All of these questions are going through my mind. Like, how can this possibly be true? And this, frankly, this was probably 9 years ago at this point. And it seemed too good to be true. And I just I learned as much as I possibly could. I dipped my toes in. I tried to do all the right things, but the earning the points for a lot of people, once you get over the fact of, hey, I might have to open a credit card or two or more potentially, right? It's the actual utilizing the points that there's a skill set there. I think it's not exceptionally difficult to do the high level stuff. So I don't want to basically portray that this is too difficult to get into or everybody should turn around and run the other way. By no means is that true, but you can go as deep as you want to, I think is what I'm trying to say.
Absolutely. I think a lot of people, they get decision paralysis where they have like 3 or 4 different awards that they can do and they're not really sure what to do. So then instead of just seeking out resources or something, they just don't book it till it's all gone and the awards are gone. At the end of the day, you don't really need to focus so much on trying to you maximize as much as if it works for you and your family and that's what makes you happy, do that.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree with that. And yeah, I mean, I think to me, one of the biggest aspects of succeeding with travel rewards, points and miles, is some degree of flexibility. And, like you're saying, there are, it's funny because there's both a finite number of awards and there's plenty of awards, right? It depends what we're talking about here. If we're talking about, hey, I think the example I always use is I need to go to a wedding in Jamaica on the 4th of July weekend. I think this is the ridiculous example I've been using for nearly a decade now, and it still works. So, that might be more difficult than not, right? To get the precise, hey, I need to get a saver level ticket with American Airlines on July 3rd and leave July 7th. Okay, we can probably find you some ways to save money, but are you going to necessarily find the best redemption for that ever? No, probably not. But if you said, hey, I want to go to Europe or Japan next fall, I think your response and my response would be, okay, that should be really easy to do. It's just, you have some time to plan in advance. You have some flexibility in terms of when you go, precisely where you go, those type of things. So for me, it's any degree of flexibility you can build in, the better ultimately.
Right, absolutely. And with both of those destinations, there are tons of cities you can fly into and out of too.
Right, which just helps and helps and helps. And then, it's also flexibility on where you're flying out of, right? Like I used to live in the greater New York area. And it's one of those things like, sure, perfect world, I fly out of JFK, but would I drive to Newark to get an award flight? Of course I would. Would I consider going over to where Steven lives in the greater Philadelphia area? I would consider it if I could get a direct flight, in the perfect world scenario. So it's again, it's whatever works for you. It's whatever degree of flexibility you can build in. So I think that's just kind of like what we talk about with ChooseFI, just generally in terms of FI and just making your life better is having an empowering mindset, right? Like, and to me, that's what is an empowering mindset for travel rewards is how can we build flexibility in, right? And sometimes you can't be flexible. So that's fine, but then you're not going to get the perfect redemption, right? So maybe you go to a card like, and I don't want to get into the weeds here, but the Capital One Venture can erase expenses that you use, and that's super simple. So there's always an answer. There might just not be as elegant of an answer if you can have flexibility and timing. So, Steven, anyway, I've hijacked your thing here. I'll be
fine. Let's cover some basics really quickly, because like the conversation you guys just laid out is fantastic, and we can take that down into the weeds in so many different directions. But we might have some people who are joining us for the first time. They saw in the newsletter that we're talking about travel rewards, getting back to traveling. So if people found ChooseFI or Travel Miles 101 or something like that in the last year, this might be the first introduction to like hardcore travel rewards. So when we say travel rewards, Brad, what do we mean by that?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think generally how we'd approach this as a framework is you are trying to earn basically credit card sign-up bonuses. And some people might answer this slightly differently, but I think you're trying to earn a significant number of rewards, points, and miles. And in doing that, you're then able to theoretically turn those into free travel. Okay, at its essence, that's what we're doing here. We're collecting points and we're utilizing points, right? It's not rocket science, but it's how do you get those points? So that's where I said, credit cards. So obviously people get a little nervous, understandably, whenever you bring credit or credit cards into it. Just any conversation, right? I mean, clearly we are about financial responsibility. So at its heart, if you are someone who has any issue whatsoever with credit cards, if you can't pay them off on time and in full every single month, then I would probably X this out and just, come back to it in a couple of years, or listen to Allison's, the Allison's real expertise as far as booking. Maybe you have some miles and points from other ways, you can glean value. But for most of us, it's, hey, I'm going to use my smart credit habits and my smart financial skills to basically earn a significant number of points. So how this really works is I think a lot of us are used to getting maybe 1% back on our credit cards, 1.5%, 2% if we're like super duper lucky, right? Whereas if you have a really good credit score and you're willing to open up a credit card for this particular, I guess, avenue that we're going down here. So you can earn, let's say, sorry, I'm trying to think on my feet here and say, like, let's say a hypothetical credit card sign-up bonus might look like, hey, you earn 50,000 miles when you spend $3,000 in the first 3 months. Okay, so that's a pretty standard credit card sign up bonus. And what that basically means is, all right, you're going to open this credit card. So this is a brand new account. And if you spend that $3,000 cumulative in over the first 3 months, and you don't have to carry the balance, you can pay it. Yeah, you could and definitely should pay it off on time and in full every single month. And once you've reached that cumulative amount of $3,000, you trigger that bonus. Now, again, we can get into weeds of little random details, but in essence, that's what happens. You earn those 50,000 miles. Now, there are different types of miles, there are different types of points. Again, in the weeds, but that's essentially what's going to happen. So in a perfect world, you're going to earn about 2 cents per mile redemption. So let's say a 50,000 mile bonus would hopefully be worth about $1,000 to you, okay, in value. That sure as heck beats the 1 or 1.5% you were going to get on your regular credit card, right? So, that's where this can be a massive. It's like getting you're talking about $1,000 in value on spending $3,000 of your regular money, right? So that's like getting a 33% rebate on that money that you would have spent anyway. And again, you're paying it off on time and in full. You're not incurring any interest. So, that's what we're talking about here. So can you put together a couple of those bonuses over a period of time and collect points? And then, that's where the skill comes in of redeeming this stuff. So hopefully that was a pretty comprehensive and understandable, at least, just overview of what we're doing here.
Yeah, it was. And at ChooseFI, we like to say that there's a reason that the credit card companies are giving these bonuses, right? Like in the FI space, we typically like to find those areas by working the system and following the rules to the T and finding those gray areas where we can take advantage of some delta. And this is definitely one of those areas where you're making a bet. The credit card company is making a bet that you don't pay it off, and the vast majority of people don't, and that's how they make money. And so, kind of going in that with a clear-eyed understanding of that, of this is why it's so important to pay these off in full every month. But by doing that, you really can maximize on these. So then, really quickly, Allison, let's hit why. Just kind of overview, like the wave tops of why is flexibility so important with travel rewards. We'll just lay that groundwork as we go through the rest of the conversation.
So flexibility is key in travel rewards because like Brad said, there's a finite amount of rewards on certain routes. So like I live in Dallas, and one of the most common places I fly to is Columbus. Okay. So on that route, there might be like 5 seats available each day in economy. But, if I'm trying to book last minute, like I did this weekend, there was nothing available. So I had to go with that. But if I know typically I can book out several months in advance and I'm good to go. But if you're hamstringed to certain dates, you're going to be left over with the leftovers. Right. Do you want the leftovers or do you want the steak? So flexibility for steak.
I like it. So Allison, let's dive into this because this is important stuff. So when you said there are five seats available, is that like there are 5 seats that you can possibly use points for, or are there 5 seats that are like the better way that you can redeem points? Just give people a sense of how that works.
In this particular case, it was 5 seats that you could use points for, because we actually flew Southwest, but that's a different story. But like American, we looked at American, and they didn't have like the best use of points available that day. So I think if we wanted to, because there was 2 of us, if we wanted to fly out that day, we were going to shell out like 45,000 points for that one-way flight.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
From Dallas to Columbus. So that's not,
From Dallas to Columbus. That's, get 5,000 more, you can fly to the Maldives in business class.
So can we dive in? Actually, that's a great example of can we dive into how you compare that number? How do you know that 45,000 points is too much to spend on a flight?
Well, so at the end of the day, I'll start with this. At the end of the day, if using points can make the trip happen for you, and that's what makes you happy, use the points. Don't get bogged down into finding the best valuation for everything, because you're going to get decision paralysis. But, American does publish like an award chart, so you can always compare what you're seeing online to that, or, go find some resources like Travel Miles 101 or ChooseFI Travel and ask them, hey, I found an award for 40,000 miles to Columbus. Is that a good deal? And in this case, that cash fare was only $238, and I only booked 24 hours out. So it was like, okay, I'm just going to spend the cash because it doesn't make sense to spend 45,000 American miles on a one-way flight.
Right. Using 1 cent per point, 45,000 points is kind of like $450 equivalent worth of points.
Right. Absolutely.
As you said, I'll just spend the money.
Yeah.
Right. And that's a good, obviously people don't want to be doing like an excessive amount of math here, but that is a good kind of mental construct to just say like, okay, while your point is extremely well taken, Allison, and I love it that, hey, if at the end of the day, this makes you happy and it gets you on the trip and you weren't going to go otherwise, nobody's ever going to question you or this is very intensely personal. But that said, people like to have some just rough concept of, hey, am I getting a good deal? Right. So I think I would say personally, except in some crazy extenuating circumstance, if I'm not getting 1 cent per point, I'm usually gonna save my points. So like Steven said, if it's 45,000 miles, you just multiply that by 0.01, right? And that's $450. If in your case, I think you said it was $238 just to pay cash for it. In that case, you would say, okay, I'm only getting half a cent per point for this. There's no way I'm going to do that. I'll just save my points for when I can go to the Maldives. Like you said, I mean, that would be a $1,000 flight or so, or maybe more potentially for the same number of points. So you hold your points and you use them for a future day. Obviously, like you said, if you're not going to go on the trip because money is an issue, then, that's a whole separate issue. But in terms of, hey, we're trying to maximize, let's at least get 1 cent per point. I would love to get closer to 1.5, 2 at a minimum personally, but that's just not always possible. So I think that's a good way. And you also said something about an award chart, and this is where people do get a little bogged down in terms of like, hey, what should this cost? Like, is there any? I know it used to be like, okay, it's 25,000 miles round trip in the U.S. was just kind of like a rule of thumb. So basically 12,500 one way. That would be like the economy saver level. Does that still hold true roughly in your estimation? Like, can you give people a sense of like, hey, what should I be spending if I got a decent deal?
Absolutely. Yeah, it does exist. They've moved where there are different buckets now for awards that you can do stuff. But generally you want to look at, if you're trying to get to Europe, 25,000 AA miles for it in economy.
Okay.
If you're trying to go in business class to the Maldives, you're looking at, 50 to 60, depending on how far away it is. But if you want to go to like Hong Kong on first class, you're looking at 110,000 miles.
And are those one ways? I'm sorry, Allison.
Those are always one ways. Okay.
So it's easier. Do you think so we're speaking the same language? It's always easier just to quote the one way price, right?
Right.
Okay. So in the continental US, 12,500 would be roughly, I know there are some that based on distance, if it's closer, then it'll be less than that, maybe 7,500 or thereabouts, depending if what award, what type of miles you're using. But could someone just basically say like, hey, if I'm flying coast to coast in the US, like 12,500 would be a reasonable, like rough back of the envelope?
That's definitely a reasonable one. I think if you start pushing like the 20,000 range, just in the continental US, then you're starting to get a little bit less value for them.
Okay. That's a great rule of thumb. So yeah, 12,500 is about as good as you're going to get, unless it's a pretty short distance in geography. But yeah, anything over 20,000, you probably can do better with your miles.
Yeah.
When I first started, I was, I know that ChooseFI, a lot of times we tell people like, especially early on, we're telling people about the Chase Gauntlet and using Ultimate Rewards and how much we like Ultimate Rewards. For outside the United States, I have found United's website to be like a really great benchmark to compare everything else against, even if you don't decide to use United. Is that still, is that still kind of how you would suggest people look at comparing different award amounts when they're looking at outside of the United States?
Yes. And the thing that's nice about United is they make it clear which level of an award you're looking at. So there's not any confusion about it. With American, like, it's a little bit confusing to know which little bucket you're looking at.
Right.
Yeah.
Gotcha. So I guess let me dive down that example real quick. So I planned out our honeymoon back in 2018 to go to Greece, and so I knew I wanted to fly into Athens. I planned for it for about a year, and what was really cool is I want to open up the conversation about using partners. And so I went to the United website and looked up how much it would be to get us from Philadelphia to Athens. But then I realized that it actually would be cheaper for me to book it on Austrian Air. So I booked the entire ticket on Austrian Air, and it cost me less points. And then I actually ended up, I don't remember who their partner is, if it's American or United. I want to say it was American. I ended up on still a US airplane flying over there as an Austrian code share. And so, Brad, do you want to talk a little bit about like how sometimes you can get different points on the same airplane?
Sure. And I see a couple of questions coming in. We will kind of touch on these, but to Colin, this is being recorded for later viewing. And if we could just quickly introduce ourselves. I'm Brad Barrett from ChooseFI. We have Stephen Heptig from the ChooseFI Foundation, and our special guest, Allison from awardtravelvacations.com. She is an expert award booker. So we're really fortunate to have her. She's also one of the moderators of my Travel Miles 101 group. So huge thank you to her. We have a real expert here. So I guess, Stephen, your question. So your question is basically around
you can end up on the same airplane and pay different amounts in points. Yeah.
So basically there are alliances. There are three main worldwide alliances. And so it's Star Alliance, which United is the main US airline. I guess the One World Alliance, American Airlines, and then there's SkyTeam, which Delta is the main US airline in that. And basically, so I guess how I looked at this, the easiest explanation is let's look at the One World Alliance. Okay, so it's always what the miles that you have. Okay, that is what you use. So let's say I had British Airways miles. Now this is a very personal example because I've used these to great effect. This is actually the very first card that I opened way back when, thanks to JD Roth, our friend from Get Rich Slowly. He had a post about the British Airways Visa card, which is when it had 100,000 mile bonus way back in the day. And what's cool is you would think, hey, like, okay, I'm not going to England anytime soon. What do I need a British Airways card for? And, my short answer would be, I really don't. But then you realize the whole world opens up to you because, okay, if I have British Airways miles, I can use those miles to book not only on British Airways flights, but on any of their partner flights as well. Okay. And since, like I said, they're a One World Alliance with American Airlines, at that time it was US Airways. They're pre-merger, but you could use those BA miles to fly on American flights or US Airways flights. And now, for instance, we had a flight from Richmond, Virginia to LaGuardia in the greater New York City. Okay. And my family's from Long Island. So we would go up there all the time. And like we're talking about with Allison, normally that would be 25,000 miles round trip. Okay. I'm so used to this. We'll say one way, right, Allison? So normally it would be 12,500 one way. Okay. Because if you had US Airways miles, but because I had British Airways miles and their award chart was based on distance, actual geographic distance, I was able to find what we call a sweet spot. Okay. So I'm finding just a little oddity in that award chart and maximizing it to my benefit. That's kind of the loose definition of a sweet spot. So by saying, okay, I can use BA miles and book on the same flight, the same US Airways flight from Richmond to LaGuardia, that someone with US Air miles, who you would think would be, getting the best benefit, they're paying 12,500. I was only paying 4,500 British Airways miles. Okay, so that's an illustration of two really important concepts. It's the sweet spots, which you can find, and maybe we'll talk about that later with Hawaii a little bit. I'm sure Allison has some amazing sweet spots, because I know a lot of them exist. But it also really talks about the benefits of these alliances, and how by having United miles lets you fly all over the world, not just because United has flights, but because the Star Alliance is remarkable. And you can fly on a couple dozen, I believe, I don't have the exact number, but it's roughly a couple dozen different airlines with United miles. So yeah, that's the illustration here.
I think you're on mute.
Steven, we lost you, buddy.
There we go. The one actionable thing that I would tag on to the end of that is I discovered, at least with United and Austrian, find the flight that you want. I found the flight that I wanted on United, and then I had to call. You often can't do this. Sometimes you can transfer your points to the right place, but I remember specifically that I had to call and say, hey, I'd like to use my flights to book this Austrian Air flight, and gave them the Austrian Air number. So we
both Allison and I are trying to bite our tongues and not give exact, precise answers with everything. But yeah, that's roughly accurate. We'll go with.
Yeah, roughly accurate. There are some instances where you might have to do that. So let's jump in and knock out a few questions, and then go back to taking on some other stuff. Says, let's see here. Jennifer says, I have questions on using Ultimate Rewards points to buy Delta flights. I've read that it's possible using Air France KLM, but it seems complicated. Have any of you actually done this? So this is like a great example of kind of what we're talking about here. So Allison, you're shaking your head. You got good advice here for this?
Yeah. So it's not really complicated. It's like Brad's saying, you're using those partner flights to fly the airline or to the destination that you want to. So in this instance, if you want to fly Delta flights, but you want to book through Air France, KLM, Flying Blue, what you'll need to do is head to Air France or KLM's website and run your search there. And it's not anything complicated or anything. If you've ever booked a cash flight, you can run an award search, right? It's just the same thing. Departure city, arrival city, dates. Just make sure you click that use points or use miles box, the one extra step. And then it'll bring you up to a calendar. Sometimes there's not the awards, but again, like we talked about in the beginning, if you're flexible, you'll find plenty of space.
Yeah, that's great advice. And just for anybody who doesn't understand the lingo here, so UR points, those are Ultimate Rewards points. So they come from, those are Chase Ultimate Rewards points. And these are, in general, my favorite points, because so these points, essentially, they reside in your Chase account. And then again, flexibility, right? You're going to hear that word a lot here. You have the flexibility to then potentially transfer them to Allison. It's somewhere around 13 travel partners right now. I'm not sure the exact number, plus or minus one, we'll say. But basically, you can touch on all of the alliances, the 3 alliances, by having these Chase Ultimate Rewards points. So United is one of the partners, so you can transfer them to United and then get access to Star Alliance. You can transfer them to British Airways and get access to the One World Alliance. And I guess we're saying for SkyTeam, and is there might be a second one, but I know there used to be Korean. I don't think there is anymore. But
no, Korean's not.
Okay, so Air France KLM is the SkyTeam member. So that's why the question, I think it was Jennifer asked, is this the best bet? And so that's why this might seem nonsensical to somebody just looking at this question saying, what the heck are you people talking about? But so it's accessing, hey, I'm in the US, I want to fly Delta flights. I have Chase Ultimate Rewards points. What do I do? So you would transfer them. You'd send your Chase points to your Air France KLM account, which is nothing complicated. You just open an account, just similar to like Allison said, it's when you're searching, you just click the button that says use miles. Like there's nothing complicated about this, at the high level, right? So you're sending your points there, you open up a free account, you send your points over, and you book the flight. And it's the same Delta airline that you would have flown otherwise. You just don't have Delta points. You have Air France miles. So hopefully that made some sense.
Yeah. One little caveat is don't transfer till you find the award space, right? Because once you transfer out of your flexible currency, so in this case, ultimate rewards points, to Air France, they're not going back to Chase. It's not happening. So you got to make sure you find that space before you initiate the transfer. Otherwise, you might have lost all of those points because you can't find what you're looking for.
Yeah, that is a brilliant point. I know, Stephen, we got to be pithy here since we have a lot of stuff to get through. But this stuff is so important, right? It's like the flexibility of having those points. Allison, that is such a brilliant point. Thank you for bringing that up. Like the transfers in most cases are instant, like truly instant, to the point where 10 seconds later, you refresh and it'll be there, or you log out of your account, log back in, the points are there. So you would never want to send them preemptively. There's no point. It's only cutting out optionality, right? Like it only hurts you. So wait until the exact last instant that you're literally ready to book, and then you send them over. And so that holds true in 90+% of the cases. There's always details, right? But in 90% of the cases, that's the rule that you want to follow.
All right. So next one, Amanda saying just got started, feeling it over her head. I remember feeling this way. Signed up for the 4th credit card. How do you keep organized? Any tips? How do each of you keep your credit cards organized?
Well, as far as like keeping track of my opening dates, closing dates, dates I earn bonuses, I love the Travel Freely app because it'll keep track of all of that for you in there. And they'll send you notifications actually when your annual fee is about to be coming up. So if you need to cancel or downgrade or anything, But I also keep a spreadsheet with other stuff just because I like double systems reminders.
Yeah. Agreed. And that is my exact answer. Actually, Zach, the founder of Travel Freely, is a listener of the podcast. I've come to know him and what he's putting together there, and it's pretty remarkable. So that's probably the easiest way. As everybody who listens to me on the podcast knows, I'm super low tech. So I keep an Excel spreadsheet, and you just have to stay on top of it. But I guess my actual answer to your question would be just take a breath. Right? Like, let's not get over our heads. There's nothing, like, things aren't going away. Like, just take your time. Don't do this and get into a situation where you're not paying your credit cards on time and in full, or you're missing a payment because you got overwhelmed. And, and I'm not implying this about you specifically, obviously, but a lot of us, that can happen. So like, I counsel people, just open up one card at a time. Just make sure this works for you, and then move forward. There are things to do, obviously, like setting up auto pay on your credit card so you don't have an issue with that. You don't miss a payment. I think that kind of stuff's important. But just like anything, it's just track your information. It could be as simple as a sheet of paper. Honestly, it doesn't have to be complex.
So I'm going to group several questions together. So Allison, there's a whole bunch of questions based on like, should I cancel a card? When should I cancel it? And can I earn that bonus again? So that's like 3 questions, but they're all kind of linked together.
Okay. So when should you cancel? You never want to cancel in the first year, because card issuers like Chase and American Express, they don't like you to just kind of churn the card, in instance, earn the sign-up bonus, close the card, earn the sign-up bonus again. So wait till that second annual fee post, and then cancel or downgrade. And as far as earning the bonus again, it depends on what card it is. With Chase, they have different restrictions. They might be 24 months or 48 months. But with American Express, it's generally once in a lifetime. Once in a lifetime. It's really 7 years.
Yeah. And you want to be a good customer, in essence. We're not trying to game anybody here, right? There are rules, and you follow them, and you don't want to, I mean, there are instances where credit card companies, blacklist people, ban them, anecdotally. I mean, you want to be a customer that they are going to want your business. So again, you're not trying to game anybody here. So I think, to me, the question is always very simply like, am I getting value from this card? So there are instances where I will keep a card open and pay an annual fee. Like, again, for optionality, right? Like, I keep a Chase card open at all times because I have a boatload of Chase Ultimate Rewards points, and I've made the decision that it's worth paying the $95 annual fee in order to preserve that flexibility. So for me, that's a no-brainer. If I had 10,000 points, would it be a no-brainer? No, of course it wouldn't. But if I have many hundreds of thousands of points, in my estimation, it's a no-brainer. So I think you have to look at the value, but then, like Allison said, if you're coming up on a fee time, you call up and you're just honest and you say, hey, I'm not using this card. Right? Is there anything you can do for me? Sometimes they give you a retention bonus. Sometimes they cut the annual fee. Like, those are the kind of questions you want to ask. And if you're not getting value and you're not using the card, I think it's a reasonable decision to close it at that point.
So can you reopen it like the next month? Should you wait a little bit of time? Like, is there any tricks as to like when to apply again on some of your favorite cards?
So generally, you want to wait 30 days after you cancel or downgrade, just in case you have to call reconsideration for any reason. So you would call reconsideration because you got denied for the card for whatever reason. And it's hard to justify if you just close the card because you want to earn the bonus again, and it's only been a day, and what can you justify at that point? Nothing. But if you wait 30 days, you can say, hey, I really missed the benefits of this card for XYZ reason. And boom, there you go. Approved.
Nice. All right. Here's another quick fire question. Are purchasing points from a brand ever a good idea?
I would say probably not. I mean, there are almost no situations where you're going to get a good deal. I mean, maybe in some crazy scenario where all your points are going to expire, and the only possible way is to buy like 1,000 miles from the airline or something. I mean, it should never come to that. There's always it's a Google away of how to extend the expiration of your points, and it depends on the particular type of points, etc. But I mean, I've been doing this for a very long time, and I've never had an issue with points expiring, and I've never had an issue where I need to purchase. So, is that a hard and fast 100% rule? No, it's not. There are always weird situations, but you're going to get a pretty bad deal by buying points. You do it only in an extreme situation, I'd say.
Gotcha. Cool. So we've got about 20 minutes left. Let's really kind of put the rubber to the road. So my wife and I are thinking about taking a trip out, a post baby moon, since COVID got in the way. We're thinking about taking a trip out to Hawaii, and what's really cool is I think we're going to be able to do it for like a long period of time, like 3 or 4 weeks. And so we're I'm planning out. I can be flexible. I can do it this fall. I can do it next spring. So let's just start at the beginning and kind of walk me through all the different stuff. Allison, we'll start with you. Like, how would you go about planning a trip to Hawaii? And you got airfare, rental cars, and hotels, and food are probably your big 4 expenses.
Right. So generally, when I start to plan a vacation, I care about the flights more than I care about the hotels. But sometimes it's vice versa. I really care about the hotel more than I care about the flight. So if what matters more to you is probably the flights, securing that. So you could start out with that. British Airways is a great sweet spot to fly, although from the greater Philly area, maybe not the best, because British Airways is a distance-based, and they're going to count each stop that you make, and you'll probably have to make 1 stop in between those 2. But for me, from DFW, I got tons of direct flights out there. So for you might want to start with like Turkish, because you can get one for like 12,500 one way out there with that, which Turkish is a city partner. But you can also check out like Virgin Atlantic as well.
So Turkish is a Star Alliance partner, right? Is that what you said?
Correct.
Okay. So right. I guess just taking a quick step back, if I were thinking about this, so now that's there are a lot of sweet spots, right? And obviously you went into those, which is awesome, right? That is like the expert level. Let's take just for the beginner, because I want to ask you more questions about sweet spots and how we think about this. So for the absolute beginner, somebody who wanted to book it on their own, I guess let's say you lived in the Philly area. Like my first step would be, all right, maybe I know nothing about my airport. Like I would Google the Philadelphia airport Wikipedia page. Like that's probably my first stop. And then on every airport Wikipedia page that I've seen, there's a big section that says, and I'm looking at it right now, bear with me here, airlines and destinations. And you see a whole bunch of little line items where it's like JetBlue flies to Boston and Fort Lauderdale and San Juan. And then you see, oh, wow, American flies to what looks like 200 different destinations from Philadelphia. And then you very quickly realize, oh, wow, this is an American Airlines hub out of Philadelphia. Maybe if I know that, right? And then I say, okay, obviously this is the case. But if you didn't start there first and you just went to United's homepage, right? And said, oh, I'm going to look for a flight to Hawaii from Philadelphia on United. That's an amazing alliance. And you find nothing. You might be pretty disappointed until you realize, oh, wow, I didn't even start at the right spot. And now that doesn't mean that you can't get there on United flights, right? Because you might find, hey, United flies from Philly to their hub in Denver, and then you can fly Denver to Maui, right? So I'm not saying it's impossible, but I think you just want to go with what are the highest likelihood potentially. So for that novice person, what and this transcends Hawaii, right? Like what exists at my home airport? What options do I even have in terms of direct flights? And then you start learning about, oh, those are the hubs. Every time I see, even from little cities, I see American Airlines flies to Charlotte. They fly to Dallas. They fly to Philly, et cetera. And you see United flies to Denver and, and Houston, right? Chicago. So you start to pick up these little things by going to those Wikipedia pages. So, Allison, am I roughly right in terms of okay, that might be a starting point for a novice person?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. That's a great way to start, to understand where you can fly to direct from, or who even flies into your airport. Because there are some airports that American doesn't fly into, or United or Delta don't fly into.
Right. And you said a really important word in there too, is direct, right? I think that's a lot of us get caught up in direct, and now it depends where you live, right? Like I live in Richmond, Virginia. I'm not flying direct to many places. I'm flying direct to hubs, basically. I'm sure not flying direct to Hawaii from Richmond. So, that's not even an option. But to your point, okay, now at least I know the universe of what airlines fly out of the Richmond airport just by starting there. Steven, you had a question, buddy. Go for it.
I was going to say, I really like Google Flights as well, just as to add to that conversation. Google Flights really can show you how two cities connect and who flies those routes regularly. So we figured out Philadelphia is an American hub. Trying to get to Hawaii, I'm not going to be able to do it direct. That's pretty much guaranteed from the East Coast. So, where do I go from there in terms of trying to use my connections through Philadelphia?
So the next step, once you figure out, who flies there, is you just want to run some reward searches. So start at the portal, the Chase portal, Amex travel portal, whatever you have access to, and see how much the flights are currently costing and how much points are going to cost, because that's going to be your base level at that point. And then you want to do the same thing with all of the transfer partners, basically, if you're just starting out, because that'll give you also a sense of, well, hey, this one's going to cost this one, this one's going to cost this one, this one's going to cost this one. So eventually, once you run through that list, you're going to go, okay, well, here are my options. This one's the least. And it might end up being United is the least amount of points from your destination from Philly.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah, that's interesting. So right, like there's always this interplay between, hey, what is this flight going to cost me in terms of cash, which is what Allison started with the Dallas to Columbus flight, right? So you cannot unlink that.
Yeah.
It's cute and it's alluring to want to use points, right? But if you're spending 50,000 points for a $150 flight, you've just wasted a whole lot of points. So that's why you start there and you get a baseline of, hey, what is this going to roughly cost me? You know, you could do that. Like Allison said, you could do that from one of the portals. You can even just frankly, just go to Travelocity. Just get some sense. What is this going to cost me? And then you can move forward intelligently from there.
So, all right, I'm looking on Ultimate Rewards for how much it's going to get me there. What do you think is we've kind of talked about these travel partners, the different alliances. I'm assuming that Wikipedia is my best friend there as well in terms of like figuring out, hey, okay, who is like American obviously is a major hub, and so it's very likely I'm going to be able to code share an American. I'll go to Wikipedia and look and see like, okay, who is a code share with American and start to compare that. Is that kind of the next place to go?
I don't actually think I've ever done that, to be honest.
No, same.
To do that. Because if you, like when I was saying in the last example, if you've run all those award searches for all the transfer partners that Chase has, you've kind of already figured out who is part of each alliance and
Gotcha.
whatnot.
Okay.
With that.
Great. So we've kind of talked a lot about flights. So let's package that up as, okay, so we've got, our flights picked out. Is there anything before we move on to like hotels or cars? Is there anything else you guys want to touch on with flights?
Yeah, I don't think just kind of like my final word would be, all right, so, just to make this clear, right? So you have a sense of what it's going to cost in cash. And then, like Allison said, you're going to go to one of the portals and you can find out, all right, could I use points to book these through, let's say, the Chase travel portal? Okay. Now, this is usually not going to be a great deal, but they basically have a search engine where you can use your points to book a flight. And you don't need, like Allison said before, on the one flight, there's 5 award seats, right? So those things book up. But with the travel portal, it's akin to buying it in cash. You're just using your points to offset some of that cash fee. Okay. So, that's a use for my points. Or then you go and you look at, again, what are my options? What are my best bets? Though it doesn't preclude you. Like Steven, you live in Philadelphia and you have a lot of One World Alliance options, American Airlines options. But if you have just a couple of United flights, and I'm clicking back over there, you certainly do. You have to Chicago, you have to Denver, to Houston, San Francisco, like DC. They're major hubs. Like you might go to United.com and, like Allison said, you just click that little use miles. Like you just have to search. You probably should do 3 searches, and it might even be unnecessary to do all 3, but you just go to delta.com, and Allison can give you a better answer than this. But, this is the high level for people just looking to get into this. You go to united.com, you go to delta.com, you go to aa.com, and you just click the little redeem miles button or whatever it is, and you just see what's there, right? Like if they're going to charge you 100,000 miles to get round trip to Hawaii, or sorry, Allison, 50,000 miles one way to get to Hawaii, in the US, that's crazy talk, right? You're not going to do that. But if you can find one for 15,000 miles, 20,000 miles even, then you start considering it, right? So, and then you can get layers deep. You can contact an expert like Allison to find super duper sweet spots for you. Like, she mentioned something about Turkish Airlines, and I know there was one with Korean Air, and like that's way beyond the scope of people just learning about this right now. That's why you can hire somebody like Allison to book this for you, right? But for most normal people, it's just do this high level stuff. Go to the 3 main sites, find out, is there any availability? What is this going to cost me? Am I going to get my 1.5 cents per point, 2 cents per point? then you're in business, and then you start saying like, okay, does this make any sense to me? Right? Like, am I flying a 36-hour itinerary with 7 stops between Philly and Maui? Right? Then you don't do it, obviously. But can you find a one-stopper through Denver to Maui? Maybe. And, then you consider it. If it's 22,000 miles, something like that, like you consider it then. So it's all of these little things that go into it. But as Allison so aptly said, like, you cannot dissociate this from what the cost is in cash. That has to be, especially for people following ChooseFI, like, we need to be thinking about this. It's important. So, yeah, I think that's kind of my last word on flights. But really, frankly, and this is not an advertisement for Allison, it's like, just go to her site, awardtravelvacations.com, and like, she can literally do this for you. Like, if that is the impediment, if that's the impediment to you getting started with this, don't. Like, that's crazy. You can just hire an expert to do this for you in the cosmic scheme of things, a pittance, right? So you can do it yourself to the most part, but if you want to really make sure you're doing it right, you can hire an expert. So don't let that paralyze you, basically.
Awesome. So I know that we focus a lot on the airlines because that's where most people tend to get the most bang for the buck in terms of points. But there's also some pretty clever ways to use points with hotels. So to each of you want to give us, Allison, you can start. Give us kind of maybe your favorite redemptions with hotels with points.
Well, I'm a Hyatt girl. Okay. I recently divorced Marriott. And I don't even consider those Hiltons. But they're all good options. They all have their good and bad points, but I just prefer Hyatt. I'm actually in a Hyatt tonight. It just kind of happened. So yeah. But yeah, so Hyatt are great uses of Ultimate Rewards points too, because the highest total they have is 30,000. And you're talking about the really top aspirational properties, which there aren't any. There are great, wonderful Hyatt properties in Hawaii, but they're not going to cost 30,000 points. I think if I remember correctly, the highest one's going to cost you 20,000 points a night for the Andes in Maui. So, nice. Yeah.
All right, so Hyatt, which is funny because Brad, I know that we hear about you talking about Hyatt all the time.
Yep, and it was very appropriate because literally not an hour ago, an hour and a half ago, I got an email that I was just upgraded in status on Hyatt to the Explorers level here, which is kind of cool. So yeah, Hyatt, I agree with Allison. I would echo almost verbatim. Hyatt is going to be your best bang for your buck in terms of using points. I have the Hyatt card, also Chase Ultimate Rewards transfer to Hyatt. So it's pretty easy to accumulate Hyatt points. And like Allison said, there are plenty. It's easy to see the footprint of a Hilton or a Marriott and see there are thousands of these hotels. They're everywhere. But you could spend 40,000 points a night for the Fairfield Inn in Fredericksburg, Virginia, or Richmond, and it only costs you 30,000 Hyatt points to get the top of the line hotel in New York City or Paris, right? So obviously different. It doesn't exactly translate, but when you're talking about, hey, you can send Chase Ultimate Rewards points to Marriott or you can send them to Hyatt, like which would you rather do? You very obviously would rather send them to Hyatt. But there are caveats, right? In that while there might be a couple thousand Marriott hotels, there are not that many Hyatt hotels. There are still many hundreds of Hyatt hotels, but are you going to find them in every little location in the world? No, you're not. But again, that goes back to the flexibility. That goes back to like how you mentally approach this. And I mean, we use Hyatt points all the time, and you can find a 5,000 point a night, 8,000 point a night Hyatt House or Hyatt Place really, really easily. And I mean, that's a fantastic bang for your buck when you use points. So I guess, Stephen, to just kind of bring it back here to the Hawaii instance, is you would just Google Hyatt Hawaii or Hyatt Maui or Hyatt whatever, Kauai or wherever you're going, and just see, hey, what comes up? There's usually, or if you really wanted to get fancy, I think Hyatt, at least they used to have a list of all Hyatt hotels by category. So just Google Hyatt category 1, and then there's a little drop down box, category 2, 3, and you just do a control F for Hawaii, or HI is the state code. So you can very quickly find out, hey, what's there in categories, like what categories are available. There used to be, Allison, you could probably correct me, but there used to be a Hyatt Place, I think, in Waikiki, just off the beach, that was like 12,000 points a night. I don't know if that still exists. It might be 15,000 now or something, but that was always like just a really great deal. And you can find those kind of things.
Yeah, it's still there too.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Very cool. Nice. So talking hotels,
we know where Steven's staying on the.
I know. I'm gonna go look it up. I have generally traveled. I've collected Marriott points, and so I may use my Ultimate Rewards points to get me there with airfare, and then use as many of the Marriott points as I've got to kind of empty that pile and then go back to Hyatt for the rest of the time. But Jennifer Welch had a really good question. What about kind of this non-standard accommodation, right? So like, let's think Airbnb, something like that. What are some of the ways to tackle, hey, I want to, knock off a few nights of costs with Airbnb? What would be maybe, Allison, like the best way to approach that?
So if you want to focus on Airbnbs, or the only thing available is an Airbnb, the Capital One Venture is a great way to do it because you can erase those travel purchases. But another different way to do it now is through Chase Pay Yourself Back. So you could make like a grocery purchase, and then using the Pay Yourself Back tool, you could wipe out that charge and use that cash that you saved to spend towards your Airbnb instead. Because unfortunately, travel is not one of the categories you can erase purchases with, essentially, with Pay Yourself Back.
Oh, that's really interesting.
Yeah, I didn't know that.
Okay, so this is the Chase Pay Yourself Back. This is a new way to utilize Chase Ultimate Rewards points, right?
Yes.
Okay, so so you can't book an Airbnb through the Chase travel portal, but what you're saying is you take the points and you actually redeem them for Pay Yourself Back for things that you normally would spend, like groceries. I think there are a couple categories, but groceries are the most obvious. So you're in essence, you're getting that cash, and then you're just kind of mentally reusing it to pay for the Airbnb, or literally reusing it as it may be. But that's a way. Okay, that's very, very interesting. I like that. I would have never thought of that, Allison.
What about, so would that be a good option, like the Capital One? Is that a good option for other travel that might not be airlines, like something like cruises?
Yeah, I would say the Capital One Venture has historically always been best used for those kind of like ancillary things, like rental cars, cruises. I know I figured out a way to get Walt Disney World tickets paying with the Capital One Venture. So that is just really simply, you pay for it with your credit card, and then you just use their purchase eraser, or whatever they call it, to use your points to wipe that travel expense off. So that's a super easy way to do it. I guess, again, there's always layers of complexity to this, but I'm trying to paint the picture here that like you can succeed at this without knowing all the details, right? Like the 80-20 analysis of this is you can succeed really, really well without getting bogged down and getting paralyzed. So, the complexity with Capital One is now you can transfer some of those points. Some of the airlines that you can transfer them to are fairly obscure, but again, like we've talked about, they're not obscure because they're part of alliances. So, you can get into the weeds, but yeah, that's historically how people use the venture. And then there's similar cards from Capital One, the Capital One Spark Miles card. It's similar. If you have a business, you can use those points as well. And let's keep in mind here, another important point we didn't mention was that every one of these cards can be opened by each individual adult in a household can open each card. So like for instance, my wife has opened a Capital One Venture. I have opened a Capital One Venture. It doesn't preclude us at all. So that's just a really important point.
And the follow-up to that important point, right, talking about authorized users, is you don't want to put each other as authorized users, right? That way you can open up separate cards, or does it matter?
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. So
Okay,
right,
great.
that does not preclude you. There's another reason why you wouldn't want to put people as an authorized user. So it used to be, let's say 5 or 6 years ago, you would just add an authorized user. So for instance, let's be specific here, excuse me, because people don't really know what we're talking about. So I would open an account in my name and social security, and then I would add my wife Laura as an authorized user, which means she gets an actual credit card, but on my account. Okay. Now we can both spend on that card to hit that spending bonus, and we hit the bonus, we go on our merry way, right? That getting that authorized user card does not preclude her from turning around and opening that card in her name and social, a different account, and then adding me as an authorized user. So that does not impact you at all. Okay, in terms of being able to get the card. Now, again, layers, right? Layers of complexity is. Allison can talk about this more eloquently than I can, but Chase credit cards are usually considered the gold standard here, and it's more difficult to get approved for future Chase cards if you open up a bunch of cards or you have an authorized user card. So we can go into the weeds of that maybe in a future one of these, but suffice to say, you don't ideally want to add people as an authorized user unless you absolutely have to hit the spending requirement.
Gotcha. We're getting to the end of the hour here. This has been really great. We have hit a bunch of topics, but I know that a lot of stuff that we have talked about tonight, we haven't actually gone all the way down the rabbit hole. And so where are some of the resources that people can find? So Brad, what are some of the things that we've got on ChooseFI that people can go dig into to learn more about different pieces of travel rewards?
Yeah, so we have a travel course that Ed put together. I think you can find basically all of our resources if you go to ChooseFI.com/travel. We have our top recommended card there. We have a link to some of our episodes on travel rewards, and we have a link to the travel course. So that's the easiest thing. I have my Travel Miles 101. Basically, that at this point is a Facebook group that people like Allison are in as moderators. So thank you again, Allison. And we have real experts in there, but we have, just tens of thousands of people who are looking to help and looking to, ask their own questions, have questions answered, crowdsource information. I think we have a ChooseFI travel Facebook group, but
we do. We have several actually. There's ChooseFI travel Facebook group. There's ChooseFI cruise Facebook group. So yeah, there's a whole gamut of different Facebook groups under the ChooseFI banner that kind of cover travel rewards.
Nice. And then obviously Allison can talk about her award booking service, but this clearly is not a commercial from me, but you can hear how knowledgeable she is on this. And again, if this is going to paralyze you, or frankly, even if you just don't want to spend the time and you want to have an expert do this and have the reassurance that I have an expert who is doing this for me and is helping me book this, awardtravelvacations.com again. So, that there is certainly no shame in hiring an expert to do something for you and then you can sleep well at night knowing, hey, I spent these miles really well. I know my partner on Travel Miles 101, a guy named Alexi, he talked numerous times, in the back in the day, the course that we made for that, about him using an award booking service and how it helped him get his family to Japan every single year. I mean, that's it's really a marvelous thing. So, Allison, I talked over you for what you do, but I'd love to, maybe hear you. If you have anything else to add, please feel free.
Yeah, Allison, there was a question earlier in the night from Claudia that asked how that works. So can you give us a little bit, just real short, do people tell you what the points they have, kind of how's the interaction go?
Yeah, so you tell me what points you have access to, whether or not, it could be anything and everything. Tell me what you have, the denominations that you have in that, and then where you're trying to go. Or if you're open to just several different places, that's fine too. I'll help kind of build something and figure that out. Preferred dates, or if you're flexible to your dates, that. And then, I kind of build from there. How many travelers, if there are kids involved, because that's a different type of thing, especially for lab kids. And then I just build from there, and I find dates and flights that work for you. And I'll say this to be as transparent as possible. I can find an award that might be 150,000 miles one way, but I'm not going to tell you that unless I find the saver space, because I'm not going to tell you to waste your points on something, because that's just not right to me.
Nice.
I love that.
Nice.
I love that.
Would you, could people come to you saying, I want to go to Hawaii next year, I haven't opened up any cards yet, and have you kind of work them through the whole process beginning to end?
Absolutely. I also do wallet consultations, where if you might prefer a one-on-one conversation to get started, you might have a specific situation. You might be scared to ask a question in one of the groups, and that's okay. So I'll help you walk through those steps, what cards might be perfect for that, and what order of operations to open them up into.
Wow, that's
awesome.
Fantastic. That's a cool service.
Yeah. Well, this is we're about 5 minutes over, so I think we're going to wrap it up. Thanks for joining us, Alice and Brad. This has been really awesome. I know that lots of people are getting out to travel, and so this is really timely. Everyone who joined us tonight, thank you. This is recorded. You can find this wherever you're watching this now, whether it's Facebook, YouTube, or on our ChooseFI Foundation site. You can find the recording of this. It'll be there after. Right after we end this, a few minutes for it to process. Also, we still have 4 more nights in our summer series, 8 p.m. Eastern time on Tuesday. We cover a different topic every week. You can find that at choosefifoundation.org/events. We will always post the live videos up there. So thanks everybody for joining us, and we'll see you next week.